and be glad in it. Okay, I guess I'll come over here. Don't want to be left out. Good morning. It is a pleasure to see each and every one of you this morning. I don't know if it was because I heard Vern was preaching or because I am, so. But anyway, it's good to have you here. There, get that out of my way. We are continuing and finishing our story this morning on Noah. And I'm glad that I did split it up in half because I have 28 slides just this morning to do, talking about the flood itself. Now, the first 5 slides, I'm going to go just a quick review of some of the things that we talked about last week. This is Genesis dealing with Noah. The second half of chapter 6, going through chapter 9. We'll be looking at the last half of 7, 8, and 9 today. I want to thank everyone who gave me feedback last week on my sermon because it made you think. I had someone comment about, they had never thought about the ark being, the squared off rectangle instead of a boat like we see in most pictures. Because again, it was nothing more just a floating livestock pen. And so it didn't have to go from port to port. It didn't have to be seaworthy. Again, I don't think that as we see in most pictures, that there was lightning and waves. I think it was calm for the most part. Because again, he was having to deal with all these animals in the ark. But again, it was nice to have the comments from people that was making you think about the scriptures and making you think about things that you hadn't thought about in a while. Again, just real quick, the ark is about 1.5 football fields long, not counting the infield there, at 450 feet. Again, it's not quite half of a football field at 75 feet, and then again 45 feet high. The ark, as we know at the description given in Genesis, was made out of gopher wood. There were 3 levels or 3 decks in the ark. Again, we don't know how they were laid out. God did not give that information. Again, having the big, large animals on the bottom would make sense. Having your weight on the bottom, otherwise it'd be top heavy if you put them at the top. This picture they show on the left, having the supplies, the feed and everything in the middle, and then the smaller animals in living quarters up on the top. And again, somebody else had commented that they had never thought about the animals being smaller, maybe babies or half-grown, instead of full-grown like this picture here shows, so they took up less space in the ark. Now I want to start off this morning with the last slide from last week, looking at Genesis 7, verses 7 through 9. So Noah and his family and all of the animals that God wants to save start boarding the ark on what we would call today February 10th. Now, how can I be so specific? We're going to see that in the next slide. Going on to verse 10. Now, before I get into these couple of verses, I have a couple of questions for you. What were you doing last year at this time? Maybe for Valentine's Day, to give you a reference of what were you doing last year. Or maybe you could think of what you were doing besides, being locked in your house again. Well, what were you doing last year? Because that's going to play a significant role in what this lesson is about this morning. Last February, middle of February, what were you doing? Where were you? Go on vacation? Whatever. I want you to think about that for a minute. Now, I want you to imagine last year at this time that you were walking into the ark on February 10th. That is the day that Noah and his family started loading up the ark with their belongings and all of the animals, the birds, and the creeping things. And we know that was February 10th because of these next 3 verses. And it came to pass after 7 days. So after 7 days, so if we go 7 days back, it would be February 10th, that the waters of the flood were on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, that would be February, on the 17th day. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The rain started coming down, and the fountains of the great deep started flowing up on the 17th day of the second month, meaning February 17th. And 7 days prior to that would have been the 10th that they started loading up. Verse 10 states that it was 7 days. Now, Genesis 7, verses 13 to 18, we're not going to go over because that's just reinstating what we have just read. So for time, I'm going to skip down to verse 19. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. So everything was covered. So the highest peak on earth is Mount Everest. And I guess it changes height, maybe with the snow cap or whatever, but the new height was 29,032 feet. Now remember, a cubit was 18 inches, the measurement, a normal measurement of your elbow to your fingertips. Mine is 18 and a quarter. Okay, so that's sometimes you see different measurements, but they go mostly with 18 inches. So 15 cubics, 18 or 15 of my hands would be almost 22 feet. So if we look here where Mount Everest is 29,032 feet, that's above our standard sea level, which it is today. Okay, it got to 22 feet above that, so it would be 29,055 feet, or 54 feet above sea level. So that was our new sea level. So to give an idea of what that would have looked like, there's Mount Everest with 22 feet above that of water. The whole world was a ball of water. The reason that was so nothing could survive. No animals could climb up, or no birds could land on Mount Everest and survive. That was the reason that the world was covered to the highest point, 15 cubits above it. Strangely enough, scientists have found this fish fossil on the top of Mount Everest, and they wonder how it got there. We know. To me, it looks almost like a piranha with these teeth on it. But they have found that fossil on top of Mount Everest. Genesis 7, verse 21 through 24. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. And this answers some questions that people have. All that was on the dry land died. Some people say, well, the fish died. Well, if that was the case, then Noah would have had to have an aquarium in his ark. And he didn't. Why? Because the fish did not die, only everything living on dry land. So he destroyed, verse 23, so he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing and the bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. So here we have a time frame that the water was on the earth 150 days, and remember that. We're going to come back to it. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to forget how long the flood existed. For me, I think it was just weeks or days or whatever, but we're seeing here that it was 370 days, and we're going to see that. Now imagine being in an ark, in an enclosed structure for 370 days with just your family members and all these animals. And your daily routine is going to be the same thing, taking care of the animals. It's very important that these animals survive because of what their purpose is. Now, here we have 370 days, and we'll get into that in a minute. God doesn't have anything to do, per se, on earth because it's all a big ball of water. And so in chapter 8, God remembered Noah. Oh, yeah. When I read that, I kind of chuckle. It's like God had forgotten about Noah. He remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. Now, instead of reading the first 14 verses of chapter 8, I want to use a timeline graph to show you what chapter 8 goes through. And I don't think you're going to be able to read that. I couldn't find one that was better, but we'll cover it. So Noah and his animals started loading back here on February 10th. Now, this statement says down here in the bottom that we are told in Genesis 7:11 that the flood started on the 17th day of the second month, and we just read that. We are told that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the seventh month. And then we are told in Genesis 7:24 and 8:4 that the period of time was 150 days. Therefore, using those examples, this person who created this stated that Old Testament months were 30-day periods, not like our normal calendar where we have 30, 31, February 28. So he's going with these dates that you will see here on the bottom being based off of a 30-day calendar. I saw another one, and the dates were different, and I was guessing, because it didn't have any explanation, that they were based on our normal calendar that we have today. So when you're adding these up, it's based on a 30-day calendar month, okay? So it starts off down here at the end on February 10th. Noah and all the animals start loading up. God seals it on February 17th, and that's when the rains start coming down and the floodwaters start coming up. And we just read to where the water was on the earth for 150 days. Okay? In Genesis 7:24. Prevailed for 150 days. Then on what would be the seventh month, the 17th day, July 17th, the ark rests in Genesis 8:4 on the Mount of Ararat. And then for 74 days, the waters start receding. That's what that blue arrow is recommending. And then on the 10th month, the first day, October 1st, the waters decrease until the 10th month, and the tops of the mountains appear in Genesis 8:5. Then Genesis 8:6 tells us that it was a 40-day period that we see here till November 11th was when Noah sent out a raven. And the raven went to and fro, okay, until he could land. Then the Bible does not say there were 7 days here, but on Genesis 8:8 it states that Noah sent out a dove after 7 days, or in another 7 days. So that leads us to the 7-day period here. He lets out a dove, and it comes back. 7 days later, on November 25th, in Genesis 8:10 through 11, he lets out a dove, but it doesn't come back till that night, and it comes back with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. He waits another 7 days, then on December 2nd, he lets out a dove in Genesis 8, verse 12, and that dove does not come back. So Noah knows that there's dry land because the dove did not return. He waits another 85 days. Let's look at verse 13 in chapter 8. And it came to pass in the 601st year, remember Noah went in on his 600th birthday, or 600 years old, the first month, the first day of the month. Talk about a New Year's celebration. On January 1st, the waters were dried up on the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. That's something I had overlooked before, that Noah removed the covering of the ark. He celebrated by removing this covering. Was it a tarp over the top of the ark, or a tarp on top of part of it? Or did he go up there and remove the wood off the top so that he could see out? The Bible doesn't say. But he does remove the covering of the ark so he could look out and see the dry land. Verse 14, and in the second month of the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. February 27th. That's today. Kind of fitting, I thought. A year ago, we got on the ark, and we're just now getting off today. I thought about it'd be neat to do a sermon that stretched out through these time frames, but it wouldn't line up with Sundays for it to be. But it does line up to today, the 27th day of the second month, February 27th, they get off the ark. Verse 15 of Genesis 8. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that you may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out with his sons and his wives and their sons' wives with him. Every animal and every creeping thing, every bird and whatever creeps on the earth, according to their families, went out of the ark. Don't you think that was a great day for everyone to be able to finally get off the ark? All the animals have been shut up in their little pens, you know, and after 370 days are being able to finally get off the ark. Verse 20, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Now remember last week, back in chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, God told Noah to take 7 each of every clean animal and every clean bird. And I told you that some of the scholars believe this each to be 7 pairs of clean animals and 7 pairs of clean birds. And I told you that the other part of the scholars believe that there was 3 pairs and an odd 7th. So there was pair, and a spare. So this verse here backs that belief, because Noah takes 1 of every clean animal and 1 of every clean bird and offers them as a sacrifice on this altar. So if you had the idea that it was 7 pairs of clean animals, now he's taken 1 of those pair to offer as a sacrifice. Whereas if you believe that it was 3 pairs and an odd one, that odd one was used for the sacrifice. Again, the scriptures do not tell us what that each was, that there was 7 each clean animal and 7 each clean bird, but it kind of makes sense to me that that 7th one would have been an odd one to be used here for that sacrifice. Continuing on in verse 21, And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. And remember, we talked about 2 weeks ago of how we need help, how we need God, how we need each other. And here's another example of that God is saying that from our youth we have nothing but evil in our heart. Continuing on, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. Verse 22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, all and day and night will not cease. Going on to chapter 9. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, and on that move on the earth, and on all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. Have you ever noticed, and I don't know how much you've been out around wild animals, they fear us. They run from us. Even fish. If you have fish swimming around and you reach your hand in, they dart away. And we see that here, that God put a fear of the animals of us, because, as he stated, they are now food. And there are those who believe that, you know what, I don't need to eat greens, all I need to eat is meat. And then there are some who say, you know what, I don't need to eat meat, I need to eat nothing but greens. Well, God has given us meat, and he has given us greens to eat. And we need that for a balanced diet. Going on in chapter 9, verses 4 through 7. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely for your livelihood, or lifeblood, I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. So we see here in verse 4 that we cannot eat or drink the blood of animals or anything that is made from the blood of animals, because it is that animal's life. And then verse 8, then God spoke to Noah and his sons with him, saying, and as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, which is us, and with every living creature, and that is you, or with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast on the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and that shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. The rainbow today is being pushed in a totally different representation that's not God-given. God gave us that rainbow and the animals as a covenant that he would never again destroy the earth by water. Verse 15, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all the flesh, and that is on the earth. This is the true meaning of the rainbow that God gave to us. And again, it's not just for us, but it's for the animals too. Not that they might understand it, but we understand it, that what that rainbow represents. That he will never destroy the world again by floodwaters. It will be destroyed, but not by water. Now, do you think of that every time you see a beautiful rainbow? Or do you just admire it for what it is? Or do you look at that rainbow and say, you know what, that is God's covenant to me. That is God's promise to me that he will never destroy this world again with water. Now the story of Noah kind of takes an awkward turn here in verse 18. Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these three the whole earth was populated, as we talked about last week. Every single one of us comes through one of Noah's sons, either Shem, Ham, or Japheth. And we all, every single one of us, have the same relationship to Noah. These were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Verse 20, and Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on their back, on both of their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see his father's nakedness. And then verse 24, so Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him, then he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, he shall be to his brethren. Now, when you read all the different commentaries and try to get an understanding of these verses, these two and the next two verses, again, there's a lot of discussion as to what that could mean. Now, the theory of most of them was that Ham's lineage is cursed because he saw his father Noah naked. Now, cursed be Canaan goes all the way down to the Canaanites who lived in the land of Canaan, which was the promised land for the children of Israel. Now, if you remember, God told the children of Israel who descended from his brother Shem to totally annihilate the Canaanites when they went into the promised land. Okay? And we also see that in the time of Joshua that the Canaanites were enslaved by the Israelites who are descendants of Shem. Okay? So this goes back to Noah's curse, which states that cursed be Canaan, again, the line of Ham, they were servants of servants and shall be to his brethren. Then we go to the last of the chapter, and he said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. Again, the Canaanites, that are the descendants of Ham, were slaves to the Israelites, the descendants of Shem. In verse 27, may God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. Now, I could not find a suitable explanation in all the commentaries that I read for these last couple of verses and what they meant. They went all different directions. One of them even went all the way to say that the Jews who were descendants of Shem and the Gentiles were descendants of Japheth, and how they ended up coming together in the church, the Gentiles and the Jews. But either way, Noah has cursed Ham for what he has done, and he has blessed God. And then the last two verses, and Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and then he died. And that is the life of Noah. And what he did, what he accomplished, how he saved the world, how we are descendants of Noah, and how things went about on the ark. And I hope this study has helped you, helped to remind you of things that maybe you had forgotten, maybe helped to clarify some things that you had maybe were confused on, maybe showing you some things that you hadn't thought of, like the rectangular ark. But hopefully, I was able to present this in a way to help you with this story. And it's a wonderful story. It's a very meaningful story, and it very applies to us today as to who we are and what has happened. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, please let us know. That's what we are here for as brothers and sisters in Christ. We're here to help each other. Maybe you haven't put Christ on in baptism, and that's something that you need to do. We could take care of that sin problem as well.